cold winter evening, Anna was home alone watching TV. Her parents had left for a holiday to their friends. It had been snowing thickly all day, but the girl felt nice and cozy sitting on the sofa in the living room, wrapped in a warm wool blanket. By midnight, her parents had not yet returned, and Anna began to feel some anxiety. Anna didn't want to call them, lest they think she couldn't take care of herself. The television stood in the corner of the room next to the large window. She was watching another movie when suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed something moving in the window. In the darkness among the falling snow, she recognized the figure of a man walking toward her. As he got closer, she could make out his face. It was covered with scars, and his lips were stretched in a sinister smile. Startled, the girl froze, not daring to move. The man stood like that and looked at her silently through the glass. Then he suddenly put his hand into his coat pocket and pulled out something. It was a knife. Unable to bear it, Anna grabbed the phone from the table by the sofa, dialed the police number, and held her breath, waiting for an answer. "There's a man standing outside my window," she whispered, keeping her eyes on the creepy visitor. "He has a knife. Please come quickly. My address." Anna dictated the address. She sat motionless as the minutes passed. The man outside the window still stood staring at her. Finally, the girl heard siren sounds outside, and police officers started knocking on the door. She rushed to the front door, letting the police officers in. They told her they hadn't seen anyone near the house and found no sign of anyone. "No way," said the girl, pointing to the window. "He was just standing there when you knocked. You couldn't have missed him." "That's impossible," said the officer. "No one was there, and the snow was untouched. In this snow, even if someone had been there recently, he would have left clear footprints. But I saw him with my own eyes," insisted the girl. "You know, your eyes can play tricks on you." The officer grinned. "Maybe you watch too many movies?" The policemen were about to leave when, suddenly, one of the officers noticed something wrong. He frowned and walked around the couch where the girl was sitting. There were wet footprints and a dropped knife on the carpet behind the couch. "You weren't seeing a man outside the window," the officer said. "You were looking at his reflection. The whole time he was standing 2 feet behind you." Ellen and her husband decided to take a night off and go out on the town. They asked Betty, a neighbor girl who had babysat their children many times before, to watch them tonight. When the girl arrived, the 2 children were already asleep in their beds, so she just had to stay home and make sure nothing happened to the kids. Soon she got bored and decided to watch some movie, but there was no cable downstairs since the parents didn't want the kids to watch junk on TV. Betty called Ellen and asked permission to watch TV in their room upstairs. She was naturally allowed, but Bet had another request. She asked if she could cover the angel statue outside the bedroom window with something, or at least close the curtains, because the statue made her nervous for some reason. There was silence in the receiver for a second, and then Ellen said, "Take the kids and run out of the house. We'll call the police. We don't have any angel statue." The police found the children and Betty dead 10 minutes after the call. The angel statue was never found. Olivia lived with her father in a small house in the suburbs. When her mother died, she was only 11 years old. Since then, her father had been everything to her. They had a wonderful relationship and loved each other very much. One morning, the girl's father said that he was leaving on a business trip and would come home late at night. Having said that, he kissed her on the forehead, took his briefcase, and left the house. After getting home from school that afternoon, Olivia did her homework and sat down to watch TV. By midnight, her father still hadn't returned, so Olivia decided to go to bed. She had a dream. She was standing on the edge of a busy highway, cars and trucks passing by. She looked to the other side of the highway, and saw a familiar figure. It was her father. He held his hands to his mouth and seemed to be shouting something to her, but she couldn't make out any words. When the rumble of cars became quieter, she strained her hearing and could barely make out the words, "Don't open door." Just then, the girl woke up to some loud noise. She raised herself up on the bed. The sharp sound repeated a few more times, then the doorbell rang. She jumped out of bed, put on her slippers, and ran to the door in her nightgown. When she looked through the peephole, she saw her father's face. "Wait, I'll get it," she said, unfastened the deadbolt and was about to open the door, but at the last moment she stopped and looked through the peephole again. Something about the expression on her father's face was wrong. His eyes were wide open. He looked frightened. She put the deadbolt back in place. The bell continued to make a trilling sound. "Papa," she called out to him cautiously. "Daddy, answer me. Dad? Is someone there with you?" The doorbell rang insistently. "Daddy, why aren't you answering?" Olivia was almost crying. "I'm not opening the door until you answer it." The doorbell kept ringing, but her father remained silent. Olivia sat huddled in the corner of the hallway, listening to the incessant ringing of the doorbell. This went on for about an hour, then she fell into oblivion. At dawn, Olivia woke up and realized that the doorbell was no longer ringing. She crept to the door and looked through the peephole again. Her father was still standing there looking right at her. The girl cautiously opened the door and screamed. Her father's severed head was nailed to the door at peephole level. There was a note pinned to the doorbell with just 2 words, "Clever girl." Not too long ago, my life changed beyond recognition. Some of you will find my story useful in the future, and some of you will listen and forget. And so, I opened my eyes in the middle of the night. This doesn't usually happen to me. When I go to bed in the evening, I sleep until the morning, until I am awakened by the persistent sound of the alarm clock or sleep. But here, I opened my eyes and stared into the darkness. What woke me up? There was a certain feeling as if something was wrong, as if something had happened, but what? I stretched out my hand in search of my smartphone, which I had habitually placed on the small nightstand next to the bed. It was impenetrable darkness, not a single light, and I even pulled back the curtains, hoping that the light from the lampposts would penetrate the room and dilute the thick, lingering gloom that gave my body goosebumps. It wasn't that I was afraid of the dark. No, I wasn't. But in this case, things were a little different. Realizing that the situation outside the window was no different from the one in my apartment, I tried to unlock my phone. "What?" I said out loud when all my attempts to unlock the gadget were in vain. Strangely, I remembered that the battery charge was just under 100%. Maybe it was broken or glitchy. Okay, whatever. I got out of bed and headed toward the door, flicked the switch, but nothing happened. I left the room and walked toward the kitchen by feel and memory, listening to the oppressive silence every now and then. It was unusual, because it often happened that I had to go to bed late at night, and I can say with certainty that even closer to morning, there were sounds outside the window, whether it was the barking of dogs in the distance or the rumble of cars that occasionally but still pass on the highway, and a lot of other sounds. But not today. The only thing that surrounded me was darkness and grave silence. At the moment when I managed to get to the kitchen table, I took a lighter, which I always left on the same place out of habit. I flicked the wheel. Nothing, not a spark. The second attempt was as futile as all the subsequent ones. I started digging in the drawers of the table in search of a candle and matches, which I had stocked up long ago, as it often happened that the electricity was cut off, and sitting in the dark, so much fun. But what was my surprise when the matches simply refused to light, as if some invisible force was preventing it and trying very hard to keep me in the dark. I felt my way toward the front door, with the intention of going out into the entryway to reconnoiter the situation. The moment the door opened, I saw the same picture as in the apartment itself. Pitch blackness and a crushing silence. My intuition told me to go into the apartment. Something was wrong, but curiosity prevailed over common sense. I decided to go outside, which I later regretted very much. Slowly, step by step, I descended from the landing and, finding myself in front of a massive iron door, I opened it without a second thought. Already painfully familiar darkness was waiting for me behind the door. I could not see absolutely nothing, not even my outstretched hand, not to mention the neighboring house or other objects that are near the entrance, bushes and everything else. Realizing that I would not be able to find out anything, I went back to my apartment and locked the door, and then took small steps towards my room as suddenly behind me there was a strange sound. At that moment, I stood still and listened. A feeling as if someone was drilling me with a stare, a sense of stalking was present. Tsk! My heart went into heels and my body was covered in goosebumps. Chock! I heard, already very close by, covered in sweat, on shaky legs, knocking everything in my path. Hitting the wall and cabinets, I flew into my room, closed the door, leaned back, and slowly slid down the door. I tried to catch my breath and realize what had just happened, and what the hell was that? Tsk, tsk, came from under the door, and I covered my mouth with my hands to keep from screaming. A moment later, there was a quiet pounding on the door, and then slowly something sharp scratched at it. "Open up, I know you're in there." I shouted and crawled on all fours toward the bed, sat down beside her, wrapped my arms around her knees while my body shook as if I had just been out in the freezing cold in my underwear. "Open up, now!" I heard a gruesome, hoarse voice outside the door, and then the pounding began, mixed with growls, sobs, and heartbreaking shrieks. I sat like that until dawn, and the pounding on the door and the sounds that accompanied it never stopped. Apparently, whatever had entered my dwelling was very anxious to get at me, and I could not imagine what would have happened to me in such a case. At first light, there was silence, and I decided to go to the door and listen. Realizing that there was no one behind the door, I walked out of the room and was shocked. The door was in such a state that it was as if a lion pride had been hanging out in my apartment all night, and they were attracted to this particular door. The moment I was in the kitchen, behind me, I heard a tsk tsk. I turned around and saw nothing, the same darkness, and then my consciousness left me. Whoever was there managed to trick me. He tricked me and took my soul with him. The moment I left the apartment, I managed to leave the front door open, allowing it to enter. It took it as an invitation, which is why it couldn't get into the room. It can't come in without an invitation. And it also brings darkness, creates hallucinations, makes you believe in things that can't and shouldn't be, as happened in my case. On me, I was left without a soul. Yes, I live, if I can put it that way, but it can't be called life. All colors are gone, everything is monotonous. I don't feel taste, smell. I don't enjoy things that used to give pleasure. Everything is grey and dull. There are no emotions or feelings. I live with my body, but not with my soul. To hell with this life. Goodbye. Yes, and if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, remember, never open the door and do not leave the house, because not for nothing they say, my home is my fortress.